Hello everyone, and welcome to the ASMR review show. So, I was thinking, I did a video on my top 5 favorite albums, and I did a video on my top 5 favorite movies. So, what if I now did a video on my top 5 favorite video games? So that's what we're doing for this video. But if you thought I was only going to talk about my top 5 favorite video games, I got bad news for you. You got clickbaited. Because I'm also going to be talking about my top 5 favorite nostalgic video games. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, I was thinking about what my favorite games of all time are, and I thought, you know, there's a lot of games that I played an absolute ton of when I was younger, and I never have played ever since. And, you know, because they're old games, I don't need to play them anymore, they don't really have any replayability to them, or they're on older consoles or systems that I don't have access to, or maybe I owned this game at one time and now I no longer own it for somewhat reason here or there, you know. It's just how it is with old tech, right? Like, for those of you who remember having VHSs, do you still have those VHSs? And if you don't, can you, like, remember the exact moment that you guys got rid of them? Or is it just you think, like, yeah, I don't have that for some reason anymore, you know, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly when, right? So I thought, well, these games, I don't know if I can really count them in my top 5. So they fulfill a different role, you know, a nostalgic purpose, right? Perhaps when I start actually telling you what games I'm talking about, you'll see what I mean, but I think there's an important distinction there between the nostalgic top 5 and the actual top 5. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get to the nostalgic top 5. So growing up, I was a Sony PlayStation kind of guy, right? I always remember having the PlayStation 1, and I've just kind of stuck with PlayStation ever since. They've had a lot more of the games I've enjoyed. I've never been one to, you know, rise to the rank of a PC master race elitist. You know, I've always console peasant. You know, a dirty console peasant. You know, don't at me. So that's also going to affect what my favorite games are, because this means that all the big Xbox games like Halo and stuff I've never really played or been into, like the classic 2007 Halo multiplayer scene. Like I was never part of that. So growing up, I was a PlayStation guy, right? So that means my first 2 picks for nostalgic games are 2 of the biggest PlayStation series from the classic era, and that was the 2 Naughty Dog series of the PS1 and the PS2 era, and that is respectively Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. So for Crash Bandicoot, that was a series I really loved, because again, since I was a PlayStation person, not a Nintendo person either, that meant I didn't have like that nostalgic vibe for like Mario or Zelda or anything like that, right? I didn't have Super Mario 64. I had Crash Bandicoot Warped, and I didn't have Mario Kart. I had Crash Team Racing. So those were my fun nostalgic games. The Crash Bandicoot series, specifically Warped, the 3rd Crash Bandicoot game, was my favorite one. And I also really dug the PS2 one, Wrath of Cortex. That one was pretty fun because you got to pilot the mech suit, the power loader from Aliens. So you can timestamp that as the TARS references Alien line. Yeah, I loved Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex because you got to pilot the power loader from Aliens. Like, it literally is. It has the claw and everything. And you got to run away from a giant explosion on like an exploding spaceship or space station. So, of course I'm gonna love that. A kid growing up was already a huge fan of Alien, and you gotta do that, right? It was probably the best Alien video game experience we had for quite a while until we got to a couple other games that we'll talk about later. So Crash Bandicoot Warped. That was the one that for me was the best one. I like Wrath of Cortex, but I liked Warped a little bit more. And then the other Naughty Dog PlayStation series that I loved was Jak and Daxter. I think I'm going to say something a little controversial, and that is that the one I loved the most actually was Jak 3. I've seen a lot of stuff like how it has lots of plot holes and it's way too easy compared to Jak 2, and stuff that Jak 2 set up doesn't make any sense in Jak 3, and the ending doesn't make sense, a lot of stuff like that. And maybe if I went back and played it and was like hypercritical, I would notice all these things and maybe recognize like, oh yeah, it actually ain't that great. But I haven't replayed it in forever, and I had a lot of fun with it when I was younger. It was a really cool game, a quite in-depth open worlds to explore the wastelands and the city, especially for the PS2 era. I think that was pretty graphically and technically impressive what they managed to do with that. So I had a lot of fun with it growing up, and again, that's why I'm relegating it to the top 5 nostalgic games. I do really dig all the other entries in the series, but that was the one that I played the most, and the one that really got me into the characters and the style. Also, gotta give a shout out to Jak X Combat Racing. I know that's one that some people like to mock on for, just being a silly racer game, but it's fun. It's a whole ton of fun, and one of the other most nostalgic experiences I can remember was having sleepovers with friends, and we were listening to like all this new music that I had never heard before. These new bands called Metallica and Black Sabbath, right? That I never knew about this type of stuff, and we were listening to them and playing this game all night, staying up way too late. And yeah, it was really fun experience. So I love Jak and Crash Bandicoot. Those, gotta shout out those series there. One thing that I think is a lot more of a nostalgic gaming thing is the idea of like games as like having like a big group of people over to your place and like all crowding around one TV with a whole bunch of controllers and playing split screen stuff. It's not really something that's a priority for developers anymore, it seems. Like, so few games have split screen modes. There's co-op and stuff, but it's usually like online, right? Like, it's meant to be like you and someone else has their own console somewhere else and you're playing online with them. So you might not even be in the same postal code, right? Or, sorry, zip code for my American viewers, not my glorious Canadianness. So that split screen element of us all crowding around the TV, what a great time. And there's so many fun split screen games or cooperative, games. Not necessarily split screen, but you could have multiple people on the same console playing the game on the same TV. And yeah, it seems that's kind of been like shoved to the side. The main thing is like big epic story games that are third-person RPG with stealth elements and exploring an open world. love all those games. Those are great, absolutely. But, you know, that style, it's moved on from the cooperative experience, right? And now it's not really as fun to game with people. Like, that's how it is. And like with Twitch streaming and stuff like that, you know, you're watching the person to watch them play the game, but you're also mainly watching because of the person, right? You can find hundreds of people streaming like the newest big story epic, but you're gonna watch the person you like, right? Not just for the game, but because you want to see the person watch it, right? So, I don't know. So I think the next couple nostalgic ones I want to talk about are games that I had a lot of fun co-oping or competing with friends in person, you know, when I was younger. So one game that I had a whole lot of fun with playing the co-op mode was the Lord of the Rings Return of the King video game, which was released right at the same time as the Return of the King movie in 2003. There was also a similar style of game released for the Two Towers, but that one was like a solo only. There was no co-op involved in it. So Return of the King, well, it follows the events of the Lord of the Rings Return of the King movie, and you play as all the main characters of the Fellowship across different events from the movie, and it's by no means a technically perfect game. A lot of it, you know, is not fully polished, and some of it doesn't make sense story-wise. Like, I know there's some reason about Gandalf not using magic fully based on his participation in the Ring, the War of the Ring, to do with the rules of the wizards and the Order and all that they don't fully go into detail in the films. You know, but in the game it's just like, nah, you can like shoot a big spell and stuff and kill tons of enemies. So obviously that doesn't make sense, but hey, you know, you gotta be Gandalf and use magic. It's great. And yeah, I co-opted that game with friends and stuff, and it was just a fun experience, you know, especially because I was hugely into Lord of the Rings when the movies came out. Like, I remember going to see the first one, Fellowship, in theaters, and I knew nothing about it. It just looked awesome, and that movie, like, totally, like, legit blew my mind with how amazing it looked compared to everything else and how it was. And then I just got really into it, watching it, and then this Two Towers came out, and I was even more hyped from that, and that hype carried on to Return of the King, and then there was a video game of it and stuff, and yeah, so that's not a perfect game by any means, but definitely one where the fun I've had with it has stuck with me in my mind over the years, so it's great fun. The other co-op game, which I still have around, even though I don't have a PS2 or a backwards compatible PS3, it's one that I have a lot of fun with, and this is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. So, I'm not a skater, I'm not into skateboarding or that scene or anything at all, but I don't know, this was the game of choice for my friends, when I was growing up, right? And first things first, the soundtrack in this game is absolute top-notch. I mean, the opening cinematic is Ace of Spades by Motorhead, and it's just all awesomeness from there on out. I probably liked it just because you could play as like a bunch of other cool characters, like Darth Maul was in this game, of course, because it's an early 2000s game and everyone loved Darth Maul, even though he's kind of overrated, at least in the Phantom Menace movie. Like, I know he's got a whole character line in the Clone Wars series, but I've never really bothered with that, which I know is also a sin to say, so yeah, I'm really digging the grave even further here on this one, aren't I? But yeah, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Really fun game, great soundtrack, tons of fun. You know, you can make your own maps in it and do lots of crazy stuff. We were always playing with like all of the fun cheats on, you know, like moon physics and infinite grinds and manuals and all the fun stuff like that, so we didn't have to actually try, you know. That's another thing that games don't really do anymore is cheats or fun unlockables. Like, I've never really been one into the GTA games, Grand Theft Auto, but like I remember I played a bit of GTA 4, and that was like you could like type in all numbers into your cell phones and like spawn helicopters and do a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then I guess because GTA 5 has like the whole online thing to it, that they didn't want people to be able to just, you know, cheat and spawn stuff and kill other players. But it's like if you want a helicopter, you gotta find it or pay for it, or if you want a jet, you gotta steal it or buy your own. I don't know. I know it's a different style, but games don't really do cheat codes and fun stuff like that. Like, even Lord of the Rings Return of the King had a bunch of fun cheats and unlockables and stuff you could do, right? So, and I remember looking it up on websites, like, oh, cheats, and oh, is this one good? Oh, no, this website's no good. Like, I don't know. That's another element. It's very nostalgic for me, was fun cheat codes just to mess with the system. And the last most nostalgic, awesomest game for me is one that I think encompasses everything I love about my nostalgic games. Because this is a game that is on an old system. It's a PlayStation 2 game. And it's not been remade or remastered for the other consoles. It is on PC, of course, so you know you could just probably get it from Steam for like $2, not even. And it's also one that I don't think is ever going to get remade or remastered, because it's one where they kind of already did remake it in a very horrible way. And it is a game that I played a whole lot solo. I had a great time with the story mode in it, and it's a franchise that I really love. It's attached to an established universe, and I also did a lot of co-op with it. Had tons of fun playing with friends with this game. So really thinking about it, this is the ultimate nostalgic game for me. And that is Star Wars Battlefront 2. The good one. The original one. So, to put it in context for you, okay, I love Star Wars. I grew up watching Star Wars. There was never like a first time watching Star Wars. It's just always been part of my life. I've loved so many things about it, even through all the ups and downs, you know. And I played the first Star Wars Battlefront, and that was one where it kind of took me a little used to getting used to the style of the way it played, because it was different from what I'd been used to at that time. But once I got into that style, I really dug it. It was really cool to be able to play these different factions across all the different films and the locations, and they threw in a couple of really, really cool ones. And even if it wasn't a perfectly designed game, it had a real fun concept to it, right? And you could multiplayer it up with your friends and versus each other, right? And you got to play as a droideka. Yeah, it was all around a very fun game. So then when Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, was coming out, right, that was a lot of hype behind that movie. It's like, oh, we're finally going to get to see Anakin become Darth Vader, the real story of how it happened. And then they announced that, you know, Battlefront 2 was coming out, and it was now going to have, like, a lot of the maps from the first one, but revamped, and a bunch of new maps, and stuff from Episode 3, and it was going to have a story mode to it, and even bigger and better multiplayer and stuff. Like, I was like, alright, yeah, I'm hyped. Let's do this. And it totally delivered on everything I wanted. It was like exactly what I wanted a video game sequel to Battlefront 1 to be. And yeah, I know if you go back to it now, like, the AI is really dumb. It's very easy to get overpowered. The space battles are not as well designed. Like, all you really need to do is hop in a bomber, fly beneath the enemy ship, and shoot it for 20 minutes, and you'll win. But I don't know. It's really fun, and I had a lot of great time with it when I was younger, right? So again, it's a nostalgic video game for me. No, I know that this is not the best game of all time. I know that it is not perfect. I know that a lot of it hasn't aged well. I mean, it is a 16-year-old game or something like that. But I still love it. And I feel it's important to recognize the significance of this game because, of course, there was the Star Wars Battlefront reboots by DICE and EA, in like, when would that have been, like 2017, 2016-ish, something, I don't remember the exact year. But, yeah, those games were absolutely horrible. And I remember playing the demo of Battlefront 1 and enjoying it. But that's because it's all I did was I played the demo, right? The actual game is literally just that, but again, and, well, they screwed up so much stuff on the DICE Battlefronts, EA Battlefronts, really, I should say. Which is unfortunate, right? So, I talk Star Wars Battlefront 2, I have to defend the nostalgic good one. The one where it had all of the movies included without any DLC or extra stuff. You didn't have to buy like a $50, $60 season pass. You didn't have to use microtransactions to unlock the heroes and all the best stuff. You just did it by playing the game. So, yeah. Star Wars Battlefront 2, my favorite nostalgic video game. Alright. I know what you're thinking. Enough with all this nostalgic top 5 stuff. Give us the real top 5. Alright. Now, most of these you probably already know from me if you've watched any other video of mine. And most of these I've actually already done their own individual videos on because they are my favorite video games. But, let's just rattle them out, right? Number 5 is, well, I've already talked about a couple of video games that are tie-ins to movie franchises, right? Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, right? But if you know me, there is one film franchise for me that stands tall above all the others, and it has a video game tie-in that I absolutely loved, and it was everything I wanted it to be. And of course, my favorite film franchise is Alien, and therefore the video game is Aliens Colonial Marines. Wait, sorry, no, I'm thinking of something else. Of course not. It's not that garbage game. Get that out of here. It's, of course, Alien Isolation. One of the first videos I did was talking about this game and another series. And I was always trying to figure out how I could do like a gameplay video for it. So I might have to go back and play it and record some gameplay footage because it is a really fun game. So obviously the other one I mentioned, Aliens Colonial Marines, is a colossal disaster of a game. And that's unfortunate because I do like the action side of Aliens, but I also think it was something that, like, too many Alien games focused on. Like, they were always trying to be like, okay, for an Alien game, we've got to do it in the style of Aliens, where you're a badass Marine, and you've got guns, and you shoot bullets, and things die, and splatter, and there's explosions and stuff. There hadn't really been as many games focusing on the tight, claustrophobic, cramped, low run-down sci-fi, lo-fi, hi-fi 70s analog tech style of the first Alien movie. And yeah, I know that's because the Alien style lends itself to video games more, you know, especially in that era of late 80s, early 90s stuff, you know, gamers, dudes, kids, violence, shootiness, yeah, like, I get it. But I always wanted a really good horror game, a game that really made you afraid of the alien. And Aliens, Colonial Marines, well, this ain't it, Chief. This ain't it. So for me, when I heard about Alien Isolation and I saw the first gameplay footage for it, like, the hype train for me was through the roof. Like, I was just like, give me all of this now. I want it. I want it so badly. And there was a few hiccups along the way that got me nervous, right? The whole pre-order bonus to get the extra Nostromo stuff with the original cast. I thought that was like such a horrible pre-order grab bonus. I never pre-order games. It's always been a rule for me. Nothing has made me break that rule so far, and I'm going to try to continue to follow that rule for all my life, because pre-ordering a vinyl of an album you already know, well, that's a thing. Pre-ordering an album of, like, you know, a new album that's coming out, well, you know, if you're into a band, right, they've generally, like, put out a song from it, you kind of know the style, and you're going to go along with it, right? Like, I have yet to see the case of album pre-ordering be like false flag, like a band saying, hey, we've got a new album coming out, here's a song from it, it's going to sound like this, and then you pre-order the album and it turns out that was the only song that sounded like that and everything else was like something completely different, right? Like, it's a bit different in the album pre-ordering business, which even then I've not really done that much. I think I pre-ordered the most recent Tool album, Fear Inoculum, because it had the cool packaging, and that's about it, right? If I'm pre-ordering a vinyl, it's usually from an album I already know, right? And it's just because it'll be like limited 1 of 1,000 copies, so you gotta get on that. But games tend to be pretty insidious when it comes to the pre-order game, because they'll tie all these cool fancy things to it, you know, pre-order now and get the extra bonus thing here, and it's really just so they can make as much money as they want before the reviews come in. Or game trailers are like intentionally vague and misleading, and they're showing off graphics that don't represent the final product, or, you know, it ends up not being that way, right? So they're just trying to get the money in before the game comes out. And so when I saw Alien Isolation had a pre-order bonus as cool as, hey, we got the original cast of the film to come in and record their voice parts, and you get to play in literally moments from the first Alien movie, I was like, oh dear God, I might break my one rule. But I didn't. And to be fair, those levels were extra DLC, like later. It wasn't locked to a, you only get this if you pre-order thing. And also I found that when I buy games from Best Buy, it's like, I don't know what it was, but there was a time where, like, buying games from Best Buy, you could buy the game at regular price, and the version they had was the special edition pre-order version. So, like, I didn't have to pay extra or pre-order the game, and I got the Nostromo levels. I ain't questioning it. No, not gonna question it. But yeah, let's talk about the game. It was everything I wanted. Alien Isolation. A lot of people were critical of some elements, like the backtracking, and, you know, they probably didn't like that the combat was clunky, or that the alien is more annoying than it is scary once you get the flamethrower. And I didn't really feel that any of those things dragged it down for me. I thought it was a wonderful experience. I never felt the game was overly long. It was everything that I wanted. It was the definitive Alien experience for me. So yeah, Alien Isolation, it's my 5th favorite game. Love everything about it, and I might need to do a video on it. It doesn't have boss fights, but now that I'm doing the Dead Space series where we don't just show bosses, we show gameplay moments and fun stuff, perhaps that one could be a little more viable of a game to do a video on. So, we'll see. I'm not making any promises. Okay, my 4th favorite game of all time. Now, a rule that I'm trying to follow for this, I didn't establish it at the beginning, but the rule is only one game per franchise. So, in this spot, we're going to have a FromSoft Souls-like game. Because you know me, I love my Souls games, right? I'm into games that just want to beat me up until I love it. I guess I'm just really into BDSM. Wait a minute. And so, I thought, what's my favorite Souls game? Well, of the Dark Souls games, I actually really dig Dark Souls 3. I know it's the most fan-servicey one, but I liked it feeling as like a greatest hits album, all killer, no filler. Except for Fair and Keep, of course. And Demon's Souls was really fun too. It was really cool to kind of see how all the different elements evolved from that. Like, it was like the demo EP. But I'm not in the camp that likes Demon's Souls better than Dark Souls. I know there's a lot of people out there who really prefer its atmosphere and style, but I'm not in that group. I still have to play the PS5 Demon's Souls, because that requires getting a PS5. And as we all know, the PS5 drop rate is maybe only slightly more likely than the pure Bladestone drop rate in original Demon's Souls. Something I never bothered to try to do. Maybe I'm not that into BDSM. And of course, who could forget Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, a really fun experience. Definitely a more streamlined game than the Souls ones, for being no multiplayer, just story focused, and not really as much RPG to it. But a really great experience, and it was a gorgeous game. And of course, we've got Elden Ring on the horizon. Oh, Elden Ring. There's finally news about Elden Ring today. But that isn't out yet, so I can't say what it's going to be like. Now, for me, of the Souls-like games from Software, there is one that rises high above them all, and that is, of course, Bloodborne. That's my favorite out of those style of games. So, Bloodborne is my favorite Souls-type game. I know it's not a Souls game, it's only potentially set in the same universe with the same style of gameplay and similar mechanics, but it's not a Souls game. It doesn't have any kind of content from Dark Souls whatsoever, except for the Moonlight Greatsword, but I count it as like its own thing, but it's still a Souls game, it's a thing, right? But yeah, I love it because I love the Dark Souls style of gameplay, but this one really took it to a whole new level with like the gun parries, the Gothic Victoria setting that also turns into Lovecraft cosmic monstrosity horrorness. It was really all around a great experience. And it's funny because originally I thought I wasn't gonna dig Bloodborne because of the change in the style and the gun element to it, and that you had to pretty much parry and that there were no shields, right? But while it might have been quite a steep learning curve to unlearn what I had learned in Dark Souls 1 and 2, it was totally worth it. So it's a real fantastic game. is replaying it constantly. Just all around wonderful experience. Go check out my video on it if you haven't seen that one already, right? Okay, we're into the top 3 now for games. My third favorite game is, in a way, it is a nostalgic game because it was one that I played on the PS2 and one that's actually been remade twice. There was like a remastered redo of it for PS3, and then there was a full-on new remake of it for PS4. This one I'm counting not as a nostalgic game, though, because it's one that I still play consistently now that there's new versions of it available. And it's also one where I don't feel like this is like a old, dated game that I wouldn't really enjoy anymore. It's one that I think has moved beyond just having like a special place in my childhood or my earlier gamer years. And also one that I think is like, not just like, oh, this is fun because it's got pretty colors and you can jump over platforms and collect fruit, or shoot a gun, or punch things in the face. Yay. Like, this one is a true artistic masterpiece of a game. And that is Shadow of the Colossus. So, here's the PS4 version of it, which I have a video on, so go check that one out if you haven't already. Yeah, I mean, if you know anything about my taste in films, you know that my favorite type of films are long, slow, boring, and very pretty, with not a lot of dialogue, and, you know, they're generally just uninteresting films, right? Like 2001: Space Odyssey, or the Blade Runner movies, right? The longer and slower and more boring it is, the more likely I am to enjoy it, right? And Shadow of the Colossus is a long, slow, boring game. You ride around on a horse following a beam of light, and there's no enemies, and there's not really any challenge to overcome at all. And then you get to the Colossus and everything goes crazy, and you're flying on the back of a giant snake, and the music all swells up when you get on the back of it. And you're stabbing this thing, and your stamina bar is slowly shrinking away. And you do it, and then it's all over, and then you reawaken and go on this long, slow, meditative journey. Basically, it's a game that really demands your attention and focus. And if this is a game where you're kind of just playing to rush through it and not, like, take in the experience, you're playing it wrong. That's not what this type of game is for. If you're wondering why you can't just move from room to room shooting generic enemies in the face, this ain't it, Chief. That's not your type of game, you know. So, I absolutely love Shadow of the Colossus so much. Yeah, you know what? Off the top of my head, it's my favorite video game soundtrack of all time as well, easily. I know a lot of people talk about Zelda games being masterpieces that, you know, transcend time and stuff like that, but for me, I guess this was my Zelda in terms of that, you know, cool, atmospheric fantasy type experience. Yeah, this is my Zelda in that way. But again, should I have included this in the nostalgic one? Well, I don't know, it didn't seem right. It's in its own tier for me, so it's number 3 for me. Number 2 is, well, actually the second game in a franchise, so number 2 is number 2. That's pretty appropriate. And it's the second installment in a trilogy, one that I have talked a bit about before, not in a gameplay video though. And a fun trend of mine I've noticed is I bought a capture card to record PS3 games, and every game that I've planned on recording has then shortly later announced, hey, guess what, guys? We're doing a remake of it for next gen. So I went to do Demon's Souls, and they came out with the Demon's Souls PS5 version. And I just did Dead Space, and they announced the Dead Space remake. Small little side note on that, I am cautiously optimistic. It is EA, and there's a very big chance they could screw it up. So I'm sticking with my no pre-order rule, that's for sure. I'm gonna definitely be interested in it, and I will more than likely end up playing it at some point, but I'm not gonna overhype it in that, you know, this will be a drastically different version with all kinds of cut content, because that's, anytime they do remakes, but I think people are expecting them to like they thought that the Shadow of the Colossus remake, they were going to add in like all the other 64 Colossi or something like that, or that they were going to reveal the 17th Colossus that nobody could find, right? The hidden secret. And no, they threw in a little Easter egg with the door and the sword. It's a little fun thing, but nothing drastically new. So I'm not expecting that for the Dead Space remake. But I'm getting distracted. The point is that the third game that I started recording footage for that just came out with a remaster is my second favorite game, and that is Mass Effect. But specifically, my favorite one is Mass Effect 2, because I gotta keep this to one game per franchise. Though if I did count this all as one thing, it would still be number 2 on my list. So, yeah, Mass Effect franchise, absolutely love it. One of my favorite game universes, and one of my favorite gaming series. It's funny though, because as much as I love the Mass Effect games, I do have to admit that all of them have big, severe flaws and stuff that is not perfect. But I think it's the ultimate example that a game doesn't have to be perfect for me to love it, and it can have a lot of things that are extremely wrong with it and not good, and I can still love it. And that's Mass Effect for me, because every entry in the franchise is in some way the worst of the series. Mass Effect 1, it's very kind of clunky and slow in the cutscenes, you know, everyone just kind of walks up and you all just stand there like, hello Shepard, it's good to see you. Anyway, there's this big Reaper invasion right now. Hopefully that's not something too big. Anyway, I should go. And that's just all the cutscenes in the game, no matter what's going on. It's all just shot at flat angles. And then Mass Effect 3, I really didn't like the way it started really pushing the generic action third-person shooter thing. You know, it's like, alright, crouch behind cover, and then some big bad guys in power armor are gonna come in and be like, enemies taking cover over there. And then you know, like, that style to it, I just didn't like that. And there was not enough Miranda in that game, right? And then Mass Effect Andromeda, you know, had really good gameplay. The whole profiles and switching power, and they like took the idea of the Mako, but really revamped it with the Nomad. I really dug that. But also, you know, it had a really bad story. I didn't care about the bad facial animations. Everyone freaked out over that, and that was like the least wrong thing with that game. Right? I was annoyed that everyone thought that was the problem. There was much more to it, which people have now analyzed, but you know, that's how it is. And Mass Effect 2, which is my favorite of this series, also has a lot wrong with it. You know, the needlessly switching to thermal clips to make it more like Call of Duty, the more heavier emphasis on you sit in cover and pop out and shoot things, and then you stay in cover to regain health. the trimming down of the roleplay elements, the special ammo, and you can't really see most of your squad from the first game. It's like, you gotta hang out with all these new friends, and coming off of Mass Effect 1, you're like, well, can't I have the old squad? It's like there's this weird Jacob guy who's all like, I work for Cerberus. Cerberus is great. And this random person like, oh yes, Shepard, you can trust me, totally, maybe, not really, I don't really like you. And this Zide, who's like, I'm a weird guy with a weird face, big goddamn arrows. And Warren's all like, yes, definitely, Borgia symptom cost, yes, definitely, yes. All these weird people, like, it doesn't really start off on the best foot. But you really get into it, and you start talking with these characters and understanding their story. And I love how Mass Effect 2 has a really good drive to the narrative and the story. The whole thing is, alright, we've got to do an absolutely crazy thing that no one's done before. And there is very little chance that we'll survive. And the whole game is built up around this big final mission. And unlike Mass Effect 3, it delivers the intensity of that final mission. You actually have to make decisions on to where your squad goes, and how well you've played the game up until that point is going to determine how well you're going to do in the ending. So if there's certain characters you've never cared about, if you've rushed through, then you might not be able to properly save them if you're ill prepared. And if you know all the right steps, like, obviously that becomes trivial, you can just do it, but that first playthrough going in and thinking like, oh dear, like, anything could happen, right? Even Shepard might not live in the end is quite a great experience. And the way that all these choices are going to carry over to Mass Effect 3 is really great as well. I've seen a lot lately with people going through the Legendary Edition that, like, oh, Mass Effect 2 is the weakest because it's the most inconsequential. You can pull it out of the story and not much has changed. It's still that the Reapers are going to show up eventually. And that because you have so many squad mates, you don't get as many moments with them. And yeah, those are all valid criticisms, that's true. But none of those things stopped me from loving it as much as I did. And also, I argue that the strengths of Mass Effect 2 give it an edge over the other games, even if they did certain elements better, and Mass Effect 2 was weaker in some elements. It's hard to put in words. Basically, the main thing is that each Mass Effect game, in some way, sucks. Like, really bad. And in some ways, every Mass Effect game is, like, absolutely perfect and nailing it. Yeah. And for me, the one that messes up the least and succeeds the most is Mass Effect 2. But I'm not blind to the criticisms of it, so yeah. I love it. And, I was wondering how my opinions would change on it when I played through the Legendary Edition. And no, it's still my favorite, even with the revamped combat system to Mass Effect 1, which was quite a nice improvement. Still prefer Mass Effect 2 as my favorite of the series in that regard. And my second favorite game of all time, because it's got a fun gameplay, it's got a great story and characters, a really good world I get really involved into, and it's sci-fi and outer space, and I love sci-fi and outer space, if that wasn't apparent already. So yeah, great game. The main point I'm making with Mass Effect is that basically, here's my power. If you want a game to be remade or remastered for current gen, ask me to review or record the retro version of it, and magically that'll be the one that comes out, because that happened with Mass Effect. I was playing through the PS3 version to record a video for that, and then they announced the remaster, so I was like, well, I guess I'll just use that version. And then that happened with Demon's Souls, of course. And that happened with my favorite video game franchise. This is the one that should surprise no one. If you know anything about me, already talked about it. And that is the Dead Space games. Specifically, my favorite one is Dead Space 2, which I just recently put out a video on. Go check that one out for my full, uncut, 4-hour rant on this game. So, why Dead Space? What is it about it? Well, science fiction is a big thing for me because I love the science fiction genre. And I think also this game filled a pretty important void, a region of space, shall we say, for me. Because I already talked about Alien being a great franchise. And at that time, this late 2000s to early 2010 era, we didn't have a really big, heavy-hitting Alien game. You had that Alien versus Predator game, and you had Aliens Colonial Marines. Nothing really solid. You know, we got Alien Isolation eventually, which was great. But until that point, I think we didn't really have a truly great Alien game except for the Dead Space games, which, of course, there was huge influence in the style and everything to that. So this was really my favorite Alien game. Cheating a bit, I know, but it's how it is, right? So, yeah, I think that was the big thing for me. And then having Dead Space 1 be such a great Alien-style film, while also taking elements of, like, Event Horizon in it, really awesome. Then that leading into the more Aliens-inspired sequel in Dead Space 2. Just everything was fantastic. And also, I think this was such a really great way to do a sequel, at least for me, because not everyone liked the more action focus on it, and, you know, the big set-piece moments and explosions and all that stuff. A lot of people liked the more subtle horror, or the body horror stuff, like that needle in the eye bit, right? But for me, everything I wanted out of a Dead Space sequel, and every issue that I had with Dead Space 1, pretty much all of them, they fixed and addressed for me in Dead Space 2. So, you know, it was kind of a no-brainer for me that I liked Dead Space 2 more, and that it's my favorite game. It's just everything I wanted, and I'm crazy now, isn't it? 10 years old at this point? 2011, 2021, wow. It's crazy how time flies. Yeah, 10 years later, and nothing's beat this for me. So yeah, absolute easy #1 for me. Yeah. Well, that's about all I have for this video. There you have it, my top 5 nostalgic games, my top 5 current favorite games. I'll just throw in a few honorable mentions while I'm at it, and keep in mind that if I didn't talk about certain games, it could be because maybe I enjoy them, but not as much as other people do, or maybe I haven't played them. There are a lot of big, great games that I've never played or fully finished, like The Last of Us. I just haven't fully beat that game. Skyrim or Fallout, the Bethesda-style games. I couldn't really get into them, you know. I know they're really big, fun things, but it wasn't really my style. God of War, haven't played any of those fully yet, but perhaps I should. Horizon Zero Dawn is probably a game that I will love. Looks like everything I'd want out of a game, but I just haven't been in the vibe for it. So yeah, there's a lot of great games I haven't played, and then there's a lot of great games that I love, but they're just not in the top 5, you know. It's an exclusive membership. So one, obviously, I love because you see it in all my videos, is BioShock. It's a great game. I love it so much, and of course I would love it. It's a action survival horror type game set in a weird, far-off, distant, isolated location with you fighting to survive. And it has a real cool kind of sci-fi steampunky-ish element to it. So, of course, I'm gonna love BioShock, right? Great game, but not in the top 5. Game I played recently that I really loved was Death Stranding. There was a lot of hate for that game, and I didn't hate it. I loved it. It was great. But again, I like Shadow of the Colossus. I like slow, boring, meditative games. I talked about Souls games being awesome, and Souls-like games are awesome. My favorite Souls-like game that is not from Software is probably Hollow Knight, which I also did a video on. That was a very great gem of a game. And so many honorable mentions I could do. Uncharted games, right? They're great. We talked about PS1 and PS2 era Naughty Dog. PS3 era with Uncharted was great. And then I've never been one for multiplayer shooters or like competitive multiplayer because I usually suck at them. If you haven't noticed from my list, I like solo games. But the one game where I was into it enough to play it because it was a way for me to stay connected to friends who I wasn't able to see in person was Rainbow Six Siege, right? The first-person multiplayer shooter game. I don't play it at all anymore. I don't even have it installed. Because those games you have to like stay constantly into them to be good at them, or else you'll miss the update that says, hey, actually, if you shoot this gun now, it explodes and kills everyone on your team. Bet you didn't know that, right? Or, oh, hey, we made this update, so this cool strategy that you knew how to do where you could shoot through this thing and kill all 5 enemy teammates in like less than a second, like that no longer works. I'm exaggerating, but you understand what I mean. So I don't really play Siege anymore, but it was a very fun game at the time when I was into it. And then another franchise that's really great that I think I need to play more of because I've only completed a couple games in it because they're very big epic games is the Metal Gear Solid franchise. I've played Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4, and then I've done bits and pieces of all the other ones, and I know the general story. But Metal Gear Solid 3 was a great game. That's definitely my favorite. And I know that the story is really confusing, you know. So Metal Gear Solid 1 is the 3rd game in the Metal Gear franchise, and it's probably like the 6th or 7th in the timeline. It's like 3 Peace Walker and Ground Zeroes, 5 Metal Gear 2. There's like Portable Ops and VR missions and all that stuff. Yeah. The main games, though, those are great. Yeah, I'm sure I could probably just list all my honorable mentions as its own video. Oh, and Doom. Doom's great. Everybody loves Doom. Doom's fantastic, right? But yeah, we'll probably leave it at that for now, you know. I'll have to do another top 5 and then another top 5 and it'll just become a top 50. But that would be difficult for me to rank them all in order because I'm bad at that. Getting a top 5 as it is hard enough already. So yeah, most of those choices probably didn't surprise anyone if you've seen any of my videos or know anything about me or my content, right? So I guess I have to make Alien Isolation and Mass Effect videos now, so I can have one for every one of my top 5 games, right? Maybe I'm not making any promises. Anyway, yeah, you know, just been gaming a lot, and I thought, let's finish up the trifecta of top 5s, you know. So if you have another top 5 for me to do, one that I could go into as depth as I have with these ones, then let me know if you're one of the 3 people that made it this far in the video. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that. I'll catch you next time. Have a good night.